a little bit different today, but I just recently watched all of Disney's Descendants. I've been watching a lot of Kate Loves Disney, and she talks a lot about Descendants, and it got me curious enough to go for it. So, I mean, technically I'd had a lot of the story spoiled already, but I think this is one of those cases where the spoilers are what got me interested in wanting to see it for myself, so sometimes spoilers aren't bad, I guess. But anyways, having watched the whole thing, I now have thoughts on the whole thing, and I kind of want to do a rewrite, basically, of the whole thing. So yeah, let's just talk about my thoughts on it and what kind of rewriting I think would make sense for the story. I've got my notebook here with all my ideas in it, so let's just hop into it. So very first off, I would say that I think that the first one was the strongest movie and would need the least editing of things. I would probably change the order of a few events within the story if I were rewriting it, or had been the one to write it, whatever. And the song that opens the second movie, I think would have been perfect when they're first going into the school, and it's look at us being all wicked in this good school, look at us being our bad selves, and then that could help build up to them then having conflict after being in the school and being oh, these good kids aren't that bad, and there's some cool things that this place offers for us, and then that can help build off of that. And I feel like the scene where they try to break in the museum should have been later in the story, especially since it kind of gives us an abrupt Mal is torn about if she wants to be good or evil scene, and song and dance number with her mom and whatnot. And I feel like if that had been later in the story and we'd built up her actually being torn and conflicted a bit more, it would have made more sense. Whereas how it sits in the movie now is kind of just but we haven't really seen her conflicted, so why is she singing about being conflicted? Also, I would probably take out the interruptions from her friends in the song, because those just get really annoying. Maybe once, just overall, if it had happened once, that would have been okay, but that it happened multiple times throughout the song, I was just this is just tedious. Just end the song already. If you want her to go, then have her go. This is stupid. But yeah, and I did feel too, a little bit of the relationship stuff was kind of rushed in the first one. I really like Mel and Ben. I think they're overall done pretty well. But especially Audrey giving up on Ben because he's under this love potion now. It felt like a little too much of a heel turn and could have been developed better. And there were just a few things like that where the pacing of the romance and relationships in the story was a little bit I wish they'd had a little more time to develop it. But when you have that many characters, I understand why they didn't have a lot of time to develop it. So there's that. But those are my biggest complaints with that one, I would say. Also, one other note, I would say that I just wish there had been that slightest bit of foreshadow that Ben wasn't under the spell anymore. Even if it was oh, we're going on a date to the Enchanted Lake, or look at this beautiful Enchanted Lake when they arrive. And then it at least plants the seed in your head. I wonder what the enchantment on the lake does, or if it's been enchanted to turn people into swans or something, just something that gave us a little bit of foreshadow instead of him just turning to Mel and being well, do you want to wait for that non-love potion to take effect? And, it just would have been better if there was just that slight hint more. It's the same problem that I have with Frozen and Hans, in that if Hans, when he, tips into the water, had more of a smug, yes, I'm winning kind of look, instead of just a dreamy, goopy-eyed look, it would have foreshadowed perfectly what he ended up being. Same sort of thing here. I just wanted that touch of foreshadow so it doesn't feel like it's completely out of left field. Because yes, technically we know there's magic in the world and stuff, but if we don't know that lakes can be enchanted, it just comes out of nowhere that, oh wait, Ben's not been under a spell this whole time. So those are my gripes with the first film. Moving on, I pretty much think that the second film should not have existed, or at least not in the format that it did. Because I feel like the majority of the plot of it, we didn't need it all. As I've already mentioned, that first song could have been in the first movie and helped to develop the villains having fun with their bad selves. And then the whole Mal feeling torn stuff, again, I feel like they should have developed more in the first film, and we didn't need her running back to the island in order to do it, or Ben getting kidnapped. I will say that I do enjoy the second one for the song What's My Name from Uma, and I love Harry Hook. So great. So I like love their bits, but at the same time the whole plot of that one felt completely pointless and kind of out of place, and like, why did we go on this adventure? And certain characters from the first movie, like Audrey, who it seemed like would have motivations to come back as a villain in the next film, is not at all in the second film, and I was just really confused by that. And so I feel like instead of having 3 films, if we just done it as 2 instead, and instead of doing anything in the plot in the second film, basically we just jumped into what is the third one as the second one. And then for setting it up, it still builds on what Prince Ben wanted to do originally in the first one, and it just follows more streamlined to me. Because in the first one, it's like, look, we've had this success, the VKs helped save our kingdom, all is well, let's go free some more VKs and have them come. And then Audrey could come back because she's upset that Ben is with Mal now, and she can still be the main villain of it. And then when they do go to get more VKs, that's when we have Uma instead of Hades, and instead of just trying to escape, actually escaping, and then we can go off of it that way. And it could still be that, like, Uma and Mal were pretty good friends or something originally, and so Uma feels really betrayed that Mal just completely left her and didn't try to get her to come with the other VKs, and that could still give them that dynamic of we have to figure out how to get along with each other. That's super fun in the third film. But still also maintaining Audrey is the main villain, and then you can still maintain the same message at the end that anyone can do good or bad things. It doesn't matter which side of the barrier you come from. And it would have felt like a much more concise story to me if we'd done it that way. I will also say that a few other just kind of random notes on the third film. As a personal preference, I would redo how Evie's song Before Kissing Doug goes. As in, I would either just remove the song entirely because the way it stands right now I feel like really interrupts the emotion of the scene, or if we wanted to have that song, I would have her kiss him first, and then it takes him a while to wake up, so she sings the song while she's waiting for him to wake up, and then it makes more sense that she's questioning, will my kiss work? So that's a thing on my end. Also, I didn't like Doug's long hair very much. It was fine when it was in a ponytail, but when it was loose, it just looked awful. I don't know how they could have styled it better, but I wish he'd just kept his short hair. So there's that. Also, if you were changing the third movie to the second movie instead, as I kind of already mentioned with, instead of Hades escaping, it's Uma escaping, you could just completely remove the whole Hades and Ember plotline overall, because I didn't really feel like it added a lot to the third story, except for some MacGuffin-y type stuff that didn't really play that much into the story overall either. And I don't like Hades as Mal's dad. It doesn't make much sense to me. I don't know why he had to be another villain, honestly. So I didn't like it. It didn't make any sense to me, and so there's that. And so if we just left, like, Hades out of it entirely and the whole Ember thing out of it entirely, you'd get to build those relationships and things that I think would have been more streamlined if that story had been the second one. And it just would have worked better overall. Another random sidebar, just about, I guess, the second and third films that I just wanted to briefly mention as my own thing too, but I will say that it is my personal headcanon that Gil is not actually Gaston's son, but that he is LeFou's son, because the way he's characterized, he seems more like LeFou, which is kind of what they did with all the villain kids, is that they're characterized a lot like their parents, so it just makes a lot more sense to me that he was actually LeFou's kid, plus Gaston dies at the end of Beauty and the Beast, so when would he have had time to have had a kid? but LeFou is still around, so my headcanon is that Gil is actually LeFou's kid, and maybe they claim he's Gaston's kid because Gaston was the bigger baddie and whatnot, but he's actually LeFou's kid. Just my own private little headcanon. And then just some other random notes that I made about Descendants that I may as well share here while I'm talking about Descendants, but poor Ben getting enchanted in every single movie and twice in the third movie. Like, talk about using a trope and just running with it, but at the same time it's fun because it makes Ben the victim instead of the girl being the victim, so it's still kind of turning things on its head. But yeah. And then as like another general note, if anyone's curious, Carlos was my favorite character. Carlos and Evie were my favorite VKs, especially. And I'm so sad that Carlos's actor died so that I can't watch him in any future projects, because I thought he brought a lot of fun to the role, and I'd love to see other projects that he did. I know he did a few before Descendants, so I might go back and watch those, but I'm just sad that I won't get to see him doing new things in the future either. And just Evie was so fun. I've recently been getting into Soy Luna, and Sofia Carson guest stars on Soy Luna, and so that was my first experience with Sofia Carson, and then seeing her in Descendants and her getting some fun songs and things, especially in the third one, when they're all singing in that group song, and the knights are they're fighting and all that, and she's got kind of like the main thread of the harmony and the melody and stuff. Oh, so good. And Sofia Carson is super fun, and I want to keep watching films that she's in, too. And then another kind of characterization note, kind of related to the the Gil thing that I mentioned before, but Jay felt more like Aladdin's kid than Jafar's kid to me, because since when is Jafar a thief? But Aladdin was a well-established thief, so that Jay has this, like, thievery thing going on would have made much more sense if he was Aladdin's kid, but I get why they couldn't have the thieving be Aladdin's kid, since Aladdin's one of the good guys, and their whole setup was that the bad guys were sent away, and all of that. But yeah, just a minor thing that was always going in my head. It was like, he doesn't feel like he's Jafar's kid. Their Jafar didn't feel like Jafar at all to me. I didn't understand the way they characterized him compared to any of the other people. But there you go. And then just kind of a final note. I did think it was interesting how much they put into setting up the villain parents and making such a big deal about them. But then after that, they basically completely disappear after the first film, which was useful for them because in the third film, they dropped the barrier and then we don't have to deal with the repercussions of the parents actually getting out. Which, I mean, I get why they wanted to drop the barrier in the films, because they wanted to let all the kids come to Aradan and whatnot. But I feel like the villains were put there for a reason, and yes, we can give the kids second chances, but the villains have made it pretty clear they want to stay villains, so we can give the kids second chances by taking them out of the barrier while still leaving the villains behind the barrier, and that would have been my solution to the whole thing. But they did what they did, so whoops. I guess all the villains are just free now, because anyone can be evil, so why do we need to bar up anyone? But, yeah. Anyways, that's just some of my thoughts on Descendants and some of the things that I would have done if I were writing it and how I would have rewritten it. And even with all these things that I've said about how I would change, like, the structures of the films and make it just 2 films instead of 3, ultimately, really, I think Descendants would have been better as, like, a TV series instead of as just a series of movies. Because if they had done it as a TV show, then you've got a lot more time to build up the characters and develop all of the things that I was like, this felt like it was developed weirdly, or the plotline would have made sense going this way instead of the way they did go. And it just felt like it would have made more sense as a TV series. And actually, before I'd watched it, I thought that they were a TV series, but no. Just some movies, but they were fun movies overall. I do enjoy them, and I'll probably keep going back every once in a while to watch them. But yeah, let me know if you've seen Descendants, if you have any thoughts on Descendants, if you would change anything with them, if you like the second movie, because I like the characters in it, but I do not like the plot of it. So let me know what kind of things kind of go that way for you. If you have a favorite of the movies, what are your favorite characters, all that fun kind of stuff, let me know down below. I'd love to have discussions about this. And yeah, I think that's all I've got for now. This is the Uma Harper signing out.